Hi, welcome to Frames of Life. My name is Anna, the owner of Angia UK Photography. I specialize in maternity, newborn and family photography. The podcasting journey, it is still very early journey. I would like to say massive thank you to everyone who is watching my videos, sharing them with friends and family, and everyone who is subscribing my channels on Spotify and YouTube. Really appreciate your support, guys. Thank you so much to Nationwide Renewables for providing this beautiful podcast room. Thank you so much to Beauty by Fenixa for this gorgeous makeover today. We all know how to take care of our bodies, our careers, our bank accounts. But the one thing that can make or break our happiness often gets least attention. Think about it. When your relationship is solid, you can face anything. When it's broken, nothing else feels right. Your relationship isn't about having a companion. It's the heart of your home, very safe space that your children learn what loves look like, the energy that follows you everywhere. Every day we make choices. We choose what gets our time, our focus, our best energy. What would change if you gave your relationship that same care? If you treated it not as something that just happens, but something where you build with intention. The simple truth it is, loving someone well is the most powerful thing you can ever do. It changes you, it changes them, and it ripples out to touch every life around you. Today's conversation may be exactly what you need, not just to fix what's broken, but to create something more beautiful than you ever thought possible. Your relationship is waiting for you to show up. All of you. Our today's guest is Erica Marmai, Relationship Coach. Hello, Erica. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for making
How are you
come
feeling?
through. Really well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about what you are specializing in, please?
Sure. So I have been doing relational work for the past 5 to 6 years because I have started having trouble with my partner when we first met, but I have a background in holistic therapies as well, so I've always been into the self-development work, inner work, and so I always had personally an interest towards well-being and general health. And the reason why I'm here today is because when I first started seeing clients, receiving them, when they came to me for body work and holistic health services, I realized that most of them were coming with, yes, the need for care on a physical level, but most of them really needed to open up and share what was going on in their lives. And usually the trouble and the turmoil that I felt was really rooted in relational sort of disconnection, which really I would say impacted me because it made me think about where maybe I wasn't doing the work yet, where I was doing my own inner work and where I could have done better in my relationships. So I've developed this interest in really understanding myself and my behaviors and why I showed up the way I did in my relationships, and really questioned why I maybe didn't feel so satisfied at times. And so what I'm doing today is really rooted in I guess my belief that most of our discomfort and the disconnection that we feel is rooted somewhat in a disconnection that we have in relationships that we often don't get invited or encouraged to look at, research, discover. And so I really support individuals and couples to find their way back to connection, whether that's because they are already at a point of crisis, or whether that's because they value growth and they want to get better at communication, they want to build a family, they want to do it in a way that's responsible and caring towards each other. Or also individuals who just either transitioning into a new relationship or out of a relationship and then want to rediscover who they are and also be more aware of their own values, so when they are in relationship they can be true to themselves. So it's self-discovery work and couple work merged together, I would say.
And this is so much needed these days.
Yes,
right?
Very much so.
Erica, what do you think people should know about you, and why are you here talking about relationship health?
The reason why I talk about relationship health is because I am the daughter of divorced parents. And I think this is something that I believe people should know about me, because the majority of the work that I do is oriented towards the health of the family and the family unit and the dynamics that people create. The reason why I say that is because growing up, experiencing a lot of discomfort and disconnection and I guess a lack of emotional availability from my young parents, bless them, which they did what they could with what they had. I really suffered from that disconnection, and the disconnection not being focused on repair. So unfortunately, I didn't feel like a lot of affection and love around me, and so that really created patterns in my own behavior that sought love and looked for love and affection in unhealthy ways. What that also did for me, experiencing parents who weren't able, unfortunately, to communicate in a way that were beneficial to our dynamic, left me with a lot of self-doubt and self-questioning. I'm also an only child, so growing up, I felt that I was left to my own devices a lot, and so there wasn't a lot of guidance, especially not emotionally for me. I didn't really understand who I was as a little child. I could see that things, and I could feel that things weren't harmonious around me, that my parents didn't quite show me the love that I knew somehow was really destined to experience. And so what I didn't get, the needs that were met for me in my upbringing, I started to look for in my adult relationships. But that left me feeling really insecure because I didn't know what to look for, because I hadn't experienced it growing up. So I just felt really insecure, really insecure. I didn't quite know who I was. And I'm sure that most children and teenagers feel the same way. But I feel that the disconnection I felt in my family left me with some wounds, and that caused me to feel a lot of anxiety and depression, and which I didn't realize until I was in my mid-20s. And so that anxiety and the depression that I was experiencing left me feeling really confused, as if I was often creating dynamics in my relationships, in my adult relationships, that were really unhealthy. But I didn't know why they were unhealthy. I didn't know why I would feel really unseen and unloved, and I was seeking this approval from the partners that I was choosing, but I wasn't getting it, and I felt unworthy of that connection. So I am deeply rooted now in the idea that the mental health crisis we often see and feel is actually rooted in a relational disconnection. It's a relational crisis at its core. Which really prompted me to look back at my past and discover why I was having relationships that didn't feel that had the depth and the substance I needed and wanted. I was sort of living on the surface in my relationships a lot of the time, where I didn't quite know how to ask for what I needed, but then I would expect that my needs would be met. And at the same time, I would build a lot of resentment towards my partners, and so I would be left sort of feeling disappointed with the connection that I had. And I really fell into these people-pleasing patterns where I was sort of giving everybody around me what they wanted, but not being able to ask for what I wanted, and therefore feeling really deprived of love and affection. So that's really important to know, because I speak from that experience, and I guide people through that experience when I guide them, and that really signed me in a way that I had to take care of my health, because I was losing control of my own thoughts a lot of the time. So I started taking care of my mental health. I found yoga, I found meditation, and that really helped me on a personal level. But when I came into a relationship, the health of the relationship would really be like a low sort of frequency type relationship. So I had to discover more, and I had to really understand also other people, not just focus on me and why I was feeling the way I did, and realize that we have an impact on each other as humans. So once I realized that we have an impact on each other and that we have a relationship to ourselves, then we have the choice. When we have the awareness that we have a relationship to ourselves and others, and we can be more intentional, then we can also be intentional about the impact we want to make into each other's lives. And that's really what I encourage my couples to do, to care for the impact they have on each other's as people and also on each other's nervous systems, which is usually impacted. And when we don't take care of it in the right way, it impacts our health as a whole, if that makes sense. And it's not something we talk about very much. We just expect relationships to work and function because we arrive into this world already connected to everything and everyone, so we don't put a lot of effort into relationships as much as we do in other areas of our lives. So I really care about approaching relationships in a holistic way, where we get to take care of each other's nervous systems and be available even when it's hard, even when we go through challenge.
Yeah, this is what I was saying when I was recording introduction to this podcast, that it seems like we all know how to take care of our bodies, careers, and everything else.
Yes.
But relationships, yes, is just as important. And if we could focus and give same attention and same care, probably it would just be so different.
Yeah, I think we will live in a very different world.
Yeah.
Yes, and I also think that we don't, because we don't get taught early enough what is the difference between a quality relationship and an unhealthy relationship. The education system doesn't introduce us to your relationship.
I just wanted to say, it would be so helpful if they could, same as teaching about sexual life, talk about this mental part, because that's the base of everything.
Yeah.
You mentioned that on average 56% of marriages end up in divorce. I can't still believe the number, that it's so high. What do you believe most people misunderstand about what it takes to make a relationship truly work?
It's a really good question. So I think the number fluctuates, but is in between the 50s and the 60% on average.
Say it's going up.
Yeah, it's definitely going up, and there is a reason for it. And I think also the remaining percentage is there's probably a part of it, a large part of it, that isn't quite fulfilled and satisfied. Oftentimes, I think, first of all, I would say that what it really takes to make a marriage or a relationship work is intentional effort. And what that means, intentional effort in wanting to understand, first of all, what one brings into the relationship, not just in a moment, but from the past. And understand that usually we choose a partner based on familiarity. So I see sometimes people ending relationships and starting new ones, picking, yes, a different person, but ultimately recreating the same dynamic that they had before. And so repeating the same cycles and repeating history, and then thinking that maybe something's wrong with them as to why the relationship isn't working, when actually it's just the way our relational blueprint is imprinted on us, meaning that, like I was alluding to earlier, when we have relationships in the past that are rooted in early experiences, those early experiences will cause and create some level of what we call wounding or relational injuries, so to speak, that remain open. And so when we look for somebody past that, we are still sort of unconsciously looking to heal that part of us, to grow into the person that we are supposed to grow, which can only grow from the healing of that injury, if that makes sense. And so we have to recognize that we all have a past, we all have different values, we come from different family backgrounds, we probably have been brought up with certain dynamics, right, that we've seen play out between our family members or people that are close to us, and we only learn how to recreate relationships based on what we see around us. And so just understand that that's really valuable a lot of the times, but there's also a way in which you can create your own version of the dynamic with this new person you have. So it's really important that we take stock and understand that our past is very relevant when we meet in relationship with someone, when we choose a partner, and to get curious about them and what makes them behave the way they do, makes the choices that they made, and trying to get curious and non-judgmental about why they have lived the life that they lived so far up until they met us, and why they want to be with us. And also ask each other, I think this is really important, why do we want to be in relationship? That question is really important because we're so happy sometimes asking, oh, why do you want this job? Why do you have these health goals? Why do you want this trip, but we get uncomfortable asking, why do you want to be in a relationship? And why do you want to get married? Usually it's because there is an automated response, right? We are kind of supposed to do that, but we don't quite know why we specifically as individuals need that. And that's really important when focusing on creating a successful relationship. And that's the first piece.
I totally agree, because when I'm analyzing my past, I always wanted to be in a relationship.
Yeah.
And I'm always having long-term relationships. And I never wanted to be a single, but this is very true what you're saying, because it's definitely from the past. I don't know if this is the case, that I am seeking of some validation, maybe, as you were mentioning. I'm still trying to figure out many things. Maybe when I'm doing podcasts like this, it will help me, because when I am listening, I am, like analyzing every single sentence. Sometimes I need to go back to watching and just, re-listen everything, because it's just so amazing. It's like a therapy. It is a therapy. So yes, I never wanted to be a single, and I knew, like, when one relationship was finishing, it wasn't a desperation, but I just knew that I want to come home, have someone, give a cuddle to this person, lay down in bed together. Even now, being in a relationship with my partner, we've been together 12 years. I never let him to just relax downstairs and watch football. I just say, can you please come upstairs in 5 minutes? It's like, I'm just chilling on the sofa. I need a cuddle. And I think, like this is so.
But I think that's beautiful that you can do that. I think many of us.
He has no choice.
But that you feel comfortable in asking for what you need. And that also shows a level of health in the relationship, because most of us are scared of asking for what we need, and that sometimes is detrimental to the relationship, because yes, we are supposed to do our best to meet our own needs, right? Because our partner is not realistically always going to be 100% available to meet our needs, and so we have to be somewhat resourceful within ourselves to give ourselves the care and attention we need for ourselves, but also to feel comfortable and say, hey, we both contribute to the health of our relationship, and we can both contribute to each other's fulfillment, and needs are a shared responsibility. So that's really important as well when it comes to creating a successful relationship, to feel safe enough to open up the space to share what we need from the relationship, and specifically from our partner, in order to feel satisfied. And maybe watch our expectations as well, because sometimes we expect our partners to be everything for us. And we have to be realistic. How much capacity do they have? How much capacity do we have to give and receive? Considering the busy lives we all have, it's important to check in with each other's capacity. And sometimes we forget that we all have limitations, that we are humans, and people get caught up in stress. And I think that sometimes is a detriment of the relationship too.
Yeah, this is so true.
Yes.
What changes in a relationship after honeymoon phase? And what do couples need to know to keep growing together?
Yes, the honeymoon phase.
Some people think it must last
forever
till the end. Yes.
Yeah, no, that's a fantasy. Purely because the honeymoon phase is a beautiful time, right, where we somewhat forget that we have a body response to each other's openness towards relationship, which is biological. And I think the honeymoon phase is very much based on that shared desire to want to procreate, which is really a gift of nature. It's often triggered by a certain response based on how our nervous systems are wired. And it is beautiful because it can give us this sense of deep connection that it's almost it's almost like you can't describe where it comes from, where it started. It just happens, and people want that to last forever. And I think naturally we are wired to connect, and we are wired to procreate, and we have a body that knows when that's supposed to dissipate. I think we enter certain stages of a relationship without knowing it, and I think this is what I'm also passionate about teaching and educating people about. There are different stages for a reason. The initial one is the courtship, which is when we meet, right? When we have a feel for this person, when we are trying to figure out whether this person could be our life partner, depending on what we want, I suppose, at that time of our life. And once we are somewhat triggered by this primal response in our body, and we feel, oh, actually there is an attraction here, and I want this person to be a part of my life, and I can't quite figure out why, but this is what I want. And usually that's, like I was saying, the nature's job, really. Then we're attracted, and that's when the infatuation stage kicks in, the honeymoon phase. And then not long after, I would say this usually lasts for about a year or so. Depending on our circumstances, we feel really attracted to each other. We only tend to show the best parts of us, right? Because we want to keep that connection. We want to keep this person in our lives, and we want to keep feeling seen and wanted for all of the good things that we appreciate about ourselves. And this is also a time where, if we are not doing our inner work, we tend to disown our needs. We tend to disown parts of us that maybe we dislike. And so there is an element of us not showing the fullness of who we are, which naturally is bound to surface when we enter challenge, which is the third stage of a relationship. The challenging stage is when we are suddenly faced with the fact that we have a real human in front of us that has blind spots, that has fears, that has insecurities, and naturally they start to show up in behavior. Or again, if we are doing the inner work, we are self-aware enough to feel comfortable in naming what we are fearful of and what we might be in doubt of, then we can name that and we can overcome that challenge together. If we're not comfortable doing that, if we fear bringing every part of us to the table, then we're always going to hide parts of us. We're going to hide our true self. And that can become really just challenging, I would say, because the parts of us that we are disowning, that we are not owning, will naturally show in the way we speak, in the way we behave, in the choices we make, and we leave our partner feel quite confused. So this is a really beautiful time to acknowledge, and I would say prepare for, because it will come. I always like to think of what my partner and I did is almost prepare for the challenge, to create a contingency plan for when challenge arise. Because there are parts of us that we are judging about ourselves, that we fear others judge, and we tend to mold ourselves around others so that we can fit in and not being rejected. And this challenging time when stress arises, when we have just naturally challenges that arise from our own individual lives. Maybe we lose somebody in family, maybe there's a job that doesn't work out, maybe we have financial trouble, and that impacts the relationship. And so when we don't talk about those things, when we put them aside and avoid those conversations, the challenge will intensify, and so we will feel more and more disconnected. And so I invite people to work through that challenge by learning to establish safety, which usually is the fourth stage of the relationship, where we learn to create safety, or enough safety for us to take the risk of being who we are 100%, where I get to be a little bit more vulnerable and show the parts of me I'm scared to show. So the person in front of me actually sees me for who I am, doesn't have to figure out who I am. And actually, that's a beautiful time where we can get curious about each other. And again, that's a time when we will want to explore our past, and maybe exploring what fears might get in the way of us staying connected through the next stages of expansion and then exploration, which is the latter part of the relationship stage before the ending, whether the ending is by nature or by choice. So there is a course that the relationship has to follow naturally, and when we're not aware of that course, we're going to stay really confused and really disconnected throughout it because we don't have the skills to navigate each stage appropriately, I would say.
You mentioned you've been with Jack, 7 years?
7 years.
So when you entered this relationship, did you have all this knowledge already about the stages? And
Absolutely not.
No.
So we were courting sort of in the relationship for 2 years before we moved in together. And it's over those 2 years that we really sort of stayed in love, you know, the classic in love feeling, the fantasy. And then when we moved in together, which was just before the pandemic actually, meant that we were together 24/7. And so a lot of these, for me at least, my unspoken feelings, unspoken expectations that I had, the unspoken needs that I was afraid to express, really started to surface. And I realized that I was withholding parts of me that were afraid to ask for what she needed. I was scared to ask for the attention I wanted. I was scared to ask for, my love language is connection, intentional connection and conversation, meaningful conversations. And I was scared to ask for that because I thought he didn't want that. I made an assumption that he didn't want that. But then I found the courage to, because I was like, I think I'm really dissatisfied because I'm not speaking up about what I need. And he needs to know what I need, because otherwise I'm setting him up for disappointment or for failure, you know? And so I had to learn things that I didn't know. And that's when I found relationship coaching, because we fell into this dynamic where we realized we were codependent, where I was over-functioning, meaning I was trying to fix the relationship, trying to fix me, fix him, trying to make him more like me, I wanted him to value self-development and inner work more, because I had been going on my journey for the previous 10 years, and he was kind of at the beginning of it. And so I was impatient at the beginning. And I had to realize that he has his own pace, and the only thing I could do was really sort of show him what my values were. And by showing him what my values were and what I wanted from the relationship, he then was sort of kept up to date about what he could have done to meet me halfway. And so that's when we started to look for resources and help in communication, especially to help me sort of dissolve some of that over-functioning, anxious way of moving through the relationship, and his under-functioning, meaning a little bit more passive and sort of laid-back attitude, which triggered the hell out of me. Yeah, it was really difficult, but we moved through it.
It sounds very familiar.
Yeah, many people have that. So Jack and I also realized at this point that we had some new skills to learn, that what we had learned from past relationships wasn't everything, and we had an opportunity now to create a relationship that was more well-rounded. And we had to learn how to not just communicate better, but think about, how do we feel when we spend time together? How much time apart do we need? And then the conversation around money, the conversation about, you know, potentially building a family, what would have looked like, our personal goals in careers. And that's when I started to develop this method, which now we live by. And every year we have this, what I call the modern couple way of planning, which I encourage to any couple who feels often stuck and wants to find a new way to bring freshness and newness into their dynamic. Even when there's maybe some level of awkwardness about talking, in talking about certain topics, because there can be. I think many of us are only primed to talk about certain things, which are the comfortable things we used to talk about. But there are certain areas that require also attention, which I have learned the hard way. I struggled with myself. So I've developed this tool, which is ultimately a relational satisfaction tool where you can define how satisfied you are in the relationship and how satisfied your partner is. And you can score how satisfied you are in the different 8 core relational areas. One being connection, up close and personal. So how well do we do in understanding each other, our pasts, and what's happening for us internally in our experience, right? How do you feel? How do you not feel? And what do you need from me? And then communication when it comes to problem solving, right? How well can we collaborate when there is maybe a problem? Maybe there is a challenge. Can we be a team, or do we tend to disconnect and then not really know how to find our way back to connection? How satisfied are we when we have to deal with a problem? Can we do better? And then there is a conversation around family and home life if we have children. There is a conversation around money, which often can trigger people a lot, and there is an awkwardness again that comes up. So how satisfied are we in the way we talk about money, how we manage our money? Are we comfortable talking about our finances? And then home chores and organizations. This is a big one, which is so simple, but it's so mundane and it's so alive and heavy for so many of us because it's every day. And those are the parts of our lives that often we get caught up in. And so this tool can really help ask the right questions around how satisfied am I with the amount of workload that I put into this relationship, into the home, and just running life. And how can we do better? How we can collaborate again? How we can become more of a team when we share resources and share responsibilities. And then there's the conversation, are we okay with how much time apart we spend and how we spend it? Do we need more of it, less of it? And what about time together? Are we okay with the quality of the connection that we're building when we're together? And then finally, intimacy, affection, and sex, which is always a tricky one for so many of us because, again, we're not used to normalize these kind of conversations, but they are the very things that when we're not bringing them to light, they can really weigh us down. And so Jack and I started to have this yearly check-in, which helps us define how well we are doing and where we are already strong, because that's something to be celebrated, and also where can we do a little bit better in creating the relationship that we want ultimately. So that's a really good place to start usually if somebody feels disconnected and wants to create a deeper bond.
So when you are talking that you are yearly checking in with Jack, are we talking about the relationship satisfaction wheel that you're doing? You're asking yourself questions?
Yes.
It's just because I would like to address it.
Yes.
So the tool which you are using, it's called a relationship satisfaction wheel. And this tool is available on your website?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It's ultimately an image of a wheel with the 8 core areas. It looks like a little bit like a cake. And it can just be used, basically the middle point is a 0, meaning that you are not very satisfied. And then there is the external point of the wheel, which is a 10, where you are the most satisfied. So if you just want to use it as an imagery that you can share conversation around with your partner, you can just start by scoring from 0 to 10 how satisfied you are in those specific areas, and then just have a general conversation about that. Usually if you're already doing well in your communication, that should be fairly easy, I would say. If you find that that might bring up some friction, then it might be useful extending that exercise. And this is something that I offer as a separate service, where I offer a questionnaire, the satisfaction assessment, where each area I'm offering you 10 questions for each area. So communication up close and personal, communication problem solving, home chores and organization, family matters, finances and money, time together, time apart, and intimacy, affection, and sex together.
So if you need Erica's help from each theme she mentioned now, she can provide questions. How many questions per each?
So 10 questions for each area that gives you a general score about your satisfaction.
Yeah, and then she can help you to analyze through.
Correct.
It's like a one-off
2-hour session
2-hour sessions.
where I can mediate a conversation where we look at where you're already strong in your relationship, so we can celebrate that, which often we forget to do, and then where you could do a little bit more to bring balance and harmony. And maybe there are areas in which you connect already and you feel maybe you didn't know that about each other, and you can celebrate, like I said. Maybe there are areas where you could put more effort into, and that's what a tool is about, and that's what I will be there for, to help you then create tools and maybe practices that can help you get to where you need to be and reach your goal in that area too.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Erica, I would like to mention one thing here, which we didn't cover. Myth of forever chemistry. I think this is just something, I think whoever will listen to this conversation may save your marriage relationship, because it's a myth. It is a myth,
Yes.
especially when you're not putting any work into it.
The forever chemistry is what we maybe alluded to when we first meet somebody. We fall in love. We have this idea that the way we feel today is how we're going to feel forever, which is a beautiful vision to have, and yet is not just going to happen naturally without you hoping and wishing that that's how you're going to be for the rest of your lives. And this is because I think we tend to think that because society teaches us that if you have love, then you should have a successful relationship, and therefore the chemistry should always be there, when actually the chemistry does dissolve with time. And that's when you are challenged with the fact that you perhaps can improve the way you understand each other, and therefore learn to fulfill each other's needs in a way that can offer you a long-lasting relationship of quality, where you're not just together for the sake of being together because you think a long-term relationship is all you need to be successful, but actually, the longevity of the relationship, it's just a part of it. And so when you think about being together for a long time and be fulfilled for a long time, you have to focus on growing together. Because oftentimes we let that level of satisfaction lower, and then we get complacent and we tell ourselves that we're okay just putting up with each other's differences, and if we love each other we should just be happy. I would assert that a couple that it's stagnant has also a choice of not being stagnant, and has a choice to really name the fact that they feel complacent and the relationship went a little bit flat, which is naturally what happens. And then maybe they have something to learn, and that's a really good time to look and have those hard conversations and say, what else can we do to rekindle the connection that we already had, without looking at how do we recreate what we had in the past, but actually how do we grow together and reinvent how we do a relationship. Because most of my couples say that we want to go back to how things were at the beginning, and I would say that's not where we're going to go. We can use that as a beautiful point of reference to remind you of why you are together today and what brought you together, but the only way forward is to look ahead and learn to create a new shared vision, where maybe you have to relook at your individual values and create new habits and new goals for the relationship, so you can look ahead and not dwell on what you don't have anymore that's attached to the past. And so I think the fantasy of wanting things to be the same forever and ever, it's something that we just get taught from society. But the reality is that we get to reinvent our relationship every day, but it takes effort. And relationships are not supposed to be easy, but they get easier when you accept that they're not supposed to be easy.
Yeah. Especially, I think these days, social media and everything what's happening around, it's not helping us.
No.
And we've got this image in our head, but yes, everything needs to be perfect. And once you lose the chemistry, there is never a way to go back. I heard this so many times.
Right.
But I think you will lose it if you are not putting any work into it. It's just not going to carry on the way it used to be, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, it's so amazing that we are speaking about these kind of things. You often speak about being triggered and relational repair. How can couples or individuals begin to rebuild trust after arguing? You must be passionate
The
about
hot
this one.
question. I am, because I've been there so many times, you know. The first thing I want to say when it comes to triggering, when we trigger each other, is that by default we are taught, conditioned to see the triggering as bad, or to label it as a bad thing. You know, you make me feel so and so, and you know, we have to realize that when we feel triggered, we are ultimately, bottom line, under stress. And many of us are very good at wearing stress as a badge of honor, rather than tend to it and care for it and care to our nervous system. Because when we don't take care of our own stress response and take ownership over it instead of blaming the other person, we fall into this victim place, right? And when we fall into this victim place, we become somewhat, and we feel that we are entitled to have the other person take care of us. So when I see a couple getting triggered, right, to me it's actually really beautiful, because I can see where they're just missing each other, and because they're protecting each other. So if I'm triggering my partner and something brings up frustration in him, something that I do brings up frustration, I want to get curious about that. I don't want to blame him for feeling defensive. I want to understand why he feels frustrated and take ownership over the fact that maybe there is a way in which I can behave or show up in a more caring way towards him. And the fact that I care about his frustration will help him dissolve some of that to begin with. But most of the time, their frustration reflects on our frustration, and then we get frustrated and we start to blame each other for what we feel. Mostly because we don't know how to respond to the trigger, but we're actually reacting to the trigger. So most of us are really good at connecting when we are safe, at peace, when everything is going well. But when we are under stress, especially in a couple dynamic, we don't know how to care for ourselves and each other. And that's what I teach my couples. It's like, this is a human, right? It comes with his own set of challenges, and so do you. So how can you stay caring throughout that process and trust your triggers to be an opportunity for you to understand each other better? So in that moment, my communication will really focus on, instead of you trying to prove your point about why you're triggered and why they made you feel the way you do, take ownership about the fact that maybe you feel scared, maybe you feel frustrated and resentful, and say, I'm having a really hard time accepting you in this moment, for example. And I want you to feel understood by me, and I'm happy to put my stress aside just for now, and I want to come back to it, so I can help you understand you. And you have to take turns in those moments so that you can repair. Yeah. And that's pretty much it, just taking turns and slowing down in those moments to understand, oh my God, maybe I just haven't eaten today. Maybe I haven't eaten, maybe I haven't given myself time to rest enough, maybe I haven't slept well, maybe I'm carrying some level of frustration from yesterday, from something that happened, and I'm taking it up on you. And so we need to slow down and understand that we are responsible for our own triggers, and we can contribute to each other's sense of safety when we try to reconnect in those moments. And instead of blaming and defending, we can slow down and really, like I would say, care for the human in front of us, rather than put up these walls as a way of proving, certain things out of our own ego, I would say, most of the time.
I think, Erica, it's also very important what you mentioned here about taking turns, because while you were talking about like trying to collaborate together, trying to understand each other, I was thinking like, why would it be again like me? Yes, putting this extra effort. So it is very important, I think, for everyone who is listening, that they take turns. It's the key here, right?
It is. Just respecting each other's capacity and boundaries in those moments, it's very important. And it's really hard. And I think most of the time what we're trying to do when we are in a fight or a disconnection and disagreement, that we both want to be really seen in our own experience. And it takes a level of awareness to realize in those moments. This is something that I encourage my couples to do. It's like, who do you think is the most resourceful person right now that can hold the space for the other? So if you both have a point to make, if you are the one realizing that you're both struggling, to just stop and say, okay, we're doing that thing again, where we are trying to talk over each other maybe, or where we're not really hearing each other and we can do better. Would you agree? And then get your partner on board with that and say, okay. And then if you can, which I would recommend doing, say, okay, I am willing to put my point aside just for now, so I can actually understand you and help you feel understood by me. And I'm going to do my best, and I might, make some mistakes while I try, but I'm going to try and really help you feel understood by me. And then you can repeat what you're saying back to your partner, and they can confirm whether they feel seen by you, they feel understood, and maybe they don't. So they're going to keep sharing more, and you're going to keep doing that dance ultimately until he feels or she feels understood. And then once they have that point and they feel somewhat safer, right, because they feel like, oh, actually this person's caring about what I'm going through and is giving me the time and the space to express myself, then I'll probably feel a little bit more likely to want to do the same for them.
Yeah.
Right? So it's about valuing that disconnection and valuing each other's time and resources and capacity. If you come home and you're the most stressed one, it will be more likely that I'm going to have to be holding space for you. I'm going to have to hold space for you. So it's about being, honest and offer that as a gift to your partner and say, I'm going to do this for you right now, and hopefully we can make time for me later as well. And then once you feel that you're a little bit more calmer, you're lower on the scale of activation, which I can go through with you in a moment, we can then take turns again, and then you can go through the same process. And usually that takes a level of awareness that's built over time. And I have a tool called the trigger compass, which I can also offer as an image just for perspective, but it's pretty easy to visualize. So there's always a center point, which is your centered, most connected place to be, right? Where I feel calm and contained and available, right? To receive somebody's stress. And if I am connected to myself, that means I can be connected to you, right? So my goal when I have these difficult conversations with my partner is always come back to that 0 the best I can. 0 meaning collective. Maybe I'm a 2, maybe I'm a 3, and maybe I'm still a little bit stressed because I'm anticipating getting triggered if he says something that I don't like. But ultimately, I am aware that I want to be present with him, and that's my goal, right? But then I notice if he says something, there is this tendency to either 1, which on a scale will be the top. Do I tend to defend and posture up over him and try to get defensive and push him away? If there's something that I don't like that is triggering me, or do I tend to collapse in my victim state and feel self-pity from something that he said, maybe I feel offended by? Or if I see that he's avoiding a conversation, do I try and seek with anxious attitude to fix and resolve there and then when he's actually not wanting to deal with that? Or vice versa, do I tend to avoid a specific conversation? So what is my trigger style? Where do I go when I feel stressed and feel this tension between us? And can I own up? Can I take 100% responsibility for the fact that this is just how I'm reacting? And sometimes naming that in the conversation can be really useful, and say, well, what you just said there really triggered me, and I can sense this need to defend against that. Can we slow down? And then we can take a pause and we can breathe. Okay, I'm going to put that aside again and keep having you understood. And I'm going to repeat back to him what I'm hearing and say. And then I know that I trust that space we're creating is a safe space for us to then come back, and I can bring my own problems and issues to the table when it's my turn. So just understanding where I am likely to react and how, and build the language and learn what language I need to use to be seen in that, which is very important. It's a really important skill to build in the attempt to repair. Because if I don't own the fact that I'm triggered by something he said, I'm pushing that down. And again, we're going back to that dezoning my own needs, right? I need you to see that what you just shared with me had an impact on me. And I don't need you to fix it necessarily, but I want to be seen in that experience because it's hurting me in some way. And I'm not blaming you for it. I'm taking ownership, and I'm just letting you know that when you say certain things in a certain way, I feel turmoil, and it's just another way for you to understand me the way I'm trying to understand you. So it's a process, but there is a system, and I like to use systems because it's a path, right? Trigger can also, a trigger is an opportunity to find a way back to connection, and so we need to use some kind of a map to get there, and that's what I introduce couples to.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, it may be sounding like it's a really hard work, but as long as you've got the plan,
Yes.
I think it makes everything much, much, much easier. Just one more thing regarding the trigger compass tool. So again, are you doing an assessment? Is it same as with the satisfaction?
It's not necessarily an assessment. It's just something that I encourage couples to revisit
while you have some
during
coaching.
During our sessions. Yeah. Sometimes when I feel the couple needs some anchor to remember that they have a body that gets triggered and they tend to react instead of respond with calm, collected approach, I send this visual to them so they can kind of own up to where they are somewhere on that scale and say, oh yeah, I was doing that thing, and you were doing that thing. We're kind of opposite in the way we were reacting towards each other, and it makes sense that we feel the way we do when we're activated by each other's differences. So it's something that I probably have somewhere on my social media as well as a visual. I think people really enjoy those, because it helps them practically.
Thank you for clarifying.
You're welcome.
Erica, what is one powerful shift someone can make today if they feel stuck in an unhealthy dynamic, especially when they don't know where to start?
The first step is always about admitting and submitting to the truth of where you are in your relationship. And that starts with you asking yourself, okay, how genuinely and honestly do I feel in this relationship? Do I believe that I can do better in any way? Do I believe that we as a team can do better? And so taking stock of what, like I was saying earlier, what are we already doing well? I always ask this to my couples. Ask each other that question often. What are we already doing well right now? And where do we believe that we can do better? It's a little bit more challenging to ask your partner, but it's much more powerful to say, I'm open to receive your honest feedback. Where do you think I could do better? Where do you think I can show up better for you, right? And then take your partner's feedback, not as a criticism, but as a gift, right? Where you can accept or not, but consider their feedback a gift, because you're going to have something to learn from what they're missing from the relationship. So just admitting where you are by asking each other those questions and asking yourself that question, it's a really great start. And then take 100% responsibility, that's step number 2, for the dynamic that you're creating. Because ultimately, even if you're unhappy with, let's say, your partner's avoidance, where they don't want to deal with you, they don't want to have those difficult conversations, you're ultimately choosing to be in a relationship with them. So you also have a choice to stay. And this is something that's hard for people to hear, but you are always co-creating that dynamic together. So you have 100% responsibility for the outcomes that you get from the relationship. It's not 50-50. You put 100% and I put 100% in the relationship. And one way to look at this is, it's not you and I against each other, it's you and I against the problem. And also it's you and I putting effort and resources into the relationship, which you can visualize as a third entity, something that's between you and I, that we both get to nurture just like a baby, right? And then whatever comes out of it, because we both put 100 and you put 100, we get to benefit from the overflow of their relationship. So just admit the truth to begin with of where you're at. How much are you putting in the relationship? How much could you put more into the relationship? And then take 100% responsibility for the outcomes that you get. I think those initial questions are very important. And then remember, I would say third step is be willing to learn new skills, because nobody teaches us. I've never heard anyone taking a relationship class at school. You know, this is something that we learn when we grow up, when we start to have problems. So just be willing to put a student cap on and say, let's go and do it together. You know, let's go and learn what we're missing here and get curious and get excited about it. And finally, prioritize the relationship and put steps in place where you can take action to achieve those goals. You know, have a shared vision. Where are we going together? What do we really want, right? How do our differences feed into the relationship rather than keep us apart? Because often people look for compatibility when compatibility is just quite superficial, actually. You know, liking each other's shared interests, it's just a very foundational thing that is not important. You know, we get to be the humans, the individuals that we are with our shared values, yes, but we also have differences which we can perceive as adding value to the relationship, not taking it away. And so taking action towards a shared vision together despite your differences and asking those questions that I've just mentioned is really a great start, I think.
Wow. It's just like really absorb all of these informations and try to implement everything in one day isn't gonna be possible. So
No.
I'm really hoping that
practice.
you are guys enjoying listening, because I think every guest, I've done only 4 podcasts, but all of them, they are just bringing so much value. And it's not about drama or controversy, because I heard so many things about doing podcasts, that the podcast now to make it successful need to be very controversial. It needs to be drama there. I don't think it needs to be.
No.
I think it's, well, if this is the whole idea and your idea for creating something like this, perhaps yes. But my idea was mainly to help people simply live better life.
Yeah.
Listen 20-30 minutes, implement 1-2 things,
Yes.
and you will seriously be going much happier in your life. Erica, I think you've covered pretty much everything here, but I just still would like you to go through all services you are offering and how people can find you.
Yeah, thank you. So I tend to offer in-person talks and workshops because I really enjoy introducing this work and meeting people in person to really have a feel for what we're like around each other. So you'll always find on my website whether I'm giving a talk somewhere. It really varies depending on the opportunities I receive, but my workshops are usually once every quarter. And this is a relational workshop that I offer where we map your relational blueprint to understand what you are taking and bringing into the relationship you're in or into the relationship you want to be, so that you can feel more self-assured and understand your values and your core needs when you are in relationship to someone already or want to create a new relationship with someone. And that is foundational work that is necessary for you to then communicate to your partner and start to create something that's based on your true self and your authentic version of you. And that happens once every quarter. And then that usually leads into one-on-one work, whether you want to work with me individually or you want to come in as a couple. And that's something that I absolutely love doing because that's where the transformation really happens, because I guide you through very specific skills and frameworks that you get to use not just in the session, but you get to take out of the session. And I always leave you with extensive coaching notes that you can come back to time and time again, which are of really high value because they're personalized to you. And that's something that I love as well, put together for my couples, because I know they're going to be using forever and ever. And that's really my core offerings. And then sometimes I have collaborations where I offer day retreats as well. So the more sort of immersions that I enjoy also offering from time to time.
So again, website, which is
Website.
called?
www.ericamarmai.com.
And social media, Instagram profile?
Instagram is Relate Better with Erica with underscore between each word.
I will
Yeah.
adjust the
Add
photo.
it too. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. It was amazing to have you here. I really enjoyed the conversation. Hopefully you did as well. And
I did.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge. It's really, really amazing.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing space with me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening, guys. Thank you.